Alright, this is Chris V from Mobdrama.com, and I got Little Mike from Boston here with us today. Mike, why don't you introduce yourself and give us a little history on how you got started, and we'll go from there.
Well, I'd like to just say I'm known as Little Mike in underworld circles. And you mean how I got started in the mob, or how I got started in the crime business?
I say let's start with the crime business first and then work into the mob.
I grew up in a ghetto, what they call the Village, Little Italy part of a north suburb of Boston.
Okay.
And we stole from when we were kids. We were all poor, so we stole. We used to rob we had a rail line going through my area. We used to rob the rail cars and anything else that we could possibly steal. Newspapers off the corner.
How old were you back then?
Oh, I started at about 6. I was stealing Christmas trees. And then graduated up to cars and whatever else we could steal.
Yeah.
A few B&Es. They used to close restaurants mostly on Sundays. And there was an ideal time to B&E. They didn't have the alarm systems they have today.
Yeah.
So it made it kind of easy. And, you know, it was, for us, a few dollars was lucrative. But this is in the 50s we're talking. You know, and when I was 14, 13, we B&E'd a fur warehouse, not so much a warehouse, but a storage unit. And we stole all the furs, and we sold them, God only knows, I forget, it was 1954.
Yeah, how many guys were in your crew?
About 5 or 6. We were hung around a place called Everett Square.
Okay.
And everybody who I hung around with either ended up in dead or in jail, and it was a rough life, you know.
Yeah.
A bad area, and a lot of guys did heroin when I was about 14, 15. Heroin was big. I didn't happen to do it. Everybody got tattoos. For some reason, I didn't like needles, so I didn't do heroin, or I didn't get tattoos.
Yeah.
So, you know, gradually, what happened was I ran away from home at about 15, my late 15s, and I joined the military, joined the Air Force.
Okay.
So, you know, I got in there, and that did what, you know, I couldn't adapt to the strict regulations, and I ended up in a stockade.
How long were you in a stockade for?
Oh, probably 5 to 6 months.
Oof.
And then they discharged me for being underage. I got discharged a week before my 17th birthday. And I got an honorable discharge. Thank God my mother talked to the major and said, he's only a baby, he's my baby. And so my mother conned the major, Major Acree, his name was. This was in 1956. I got out and I was in a stockade for stealing a car. I ran one AWOL with girls. You know, I started, you know, was interested in girls. So, and then we robbed whatever we could along the way. And then what happens is I came back home, and then I tried to straighten out. I went back to high school. My mother forced me to, of course, naturally. And but of course I continued my mischievous ways, you know, not on a large scale. That didn't come till later, till my mid-20s.
When were you first introduced to any mobsters? When was your introduction into the mob family?
Well, my introduction wasn't until 73, I think it was, 73, 72, 73. But I had known a lot of mob figures in my 20s because I was robbing banks at the time. And I associated with all those people. And I was big in the check business, fraudulent check business. And we made a lot of money. In fact, 1972, I made $250,000, which was huge.
Back in those days.
Yeah, so I kept track of it. And I kept taking care of my guys, but I made a lot of good friends, you know, in the mob business, in the crime business. So it wasn't until the 70s that I went to prison in 1970, spent a year in Walpole and Norfolk in Massachusetts.
What'd you go to prison for?
There was a couple of 3 charges. Possession of counterfeit driver's licenses, the register stamp, that was one charge. And then the other one was an accessory after the fact to an abortion. And I got 2.5 to 3 years for that.
Damn.
Something that's legal today. In those days it was illegal, and it was the back alley stuff. And I knew about it. And actually what really was, I didn't have really anything to do with it. But I got more time than the woman who performed the abortion because I was a known criminal. The judge actually stated it when he sentenced me. He said, the man's a criminal anyway, belongs in jail.
Back in those days, they could say stuff,
Yeah, I got 2.5 to 3 years for that. But they combined the cases, And so I was out in early '71. And as soon as I come out, a lot of guys, because through the '60s we were robbing banks left and right. Every day we were working. I was married.
What was your biggest haul from
banks?
Yeah.
Well, me and Harry did one for a week, but the deposits $30,000 in 1 week. But the biggest, I think, was a John Hancock score. We made about the cash from bank to bank. I don't know, 150,000. Oh no, the biggest haul actually that we made was on the MTA, Metropolitan Transit Authority. We were able to duplicate the checks perfectly. We photographed the stamp, and it was so big that they covered it up because they didn't want to be embarrassed. The MTA themselves covered it up.
Nice.
But you know, one girl went away. She went to a halfway house, and I bought her way out of it. And I kept most of the money. It was over $500,000, close to $500,000. But I had to split it up among my guys.
Yeah.
And the different cashers. They usually got a third. But I made a lot of scores. I can't remember them all. And then when we needed the printer, the magnetic ink to print on the bottom of the checks, we had to actually physically rob the bank, not for the money, but to go over the counter to get the check machines and to get the magnetic ink strips.
Okay, so yeah, you needed that from them.
So yeah, we had to go right over the top. Plus, we had keys to the post office boxes. We had keys to the drop-off boxes, to what they call the relay boxes, the green boxes where the mailman would store the mail. So we were able to unlock that, we'd go through with a stolen car, and scoop up the mail. We had what came in there with checks, checkbooks, and then we'd go from these big hotel complexes. They used to have the drop box. You used to put the key in, to drop the box, and steal what mail that was valuable we could use. You know, it's kind of complicated, but it was interesting, and it was a constant hustle. Then we'd go to the track in the afternoon and gamble all the way. I'd do something stupid with it. I'd buy steaks at midnight. At a million wars, you know, every girl in the world wanted to be around a guy with money in the '70s especially. Everything was pre-AIDS. It was the '60s, '70s. Beatles was big at the time, I remember that. And we got an apartment, me and my cousin Leo, friend Leo, got an apartment with a building with all stewardesses. So it was one party after another.
Back in the good old days.
Yeah, in the '60s. In fact, I told my friend, my cousin, I said, listen, I'm going to go to hairdressing school, because where's where all the broads were. I graduated.
And you're the only straight guy there.
Yeah, we ripped through that whole school. We didn't miss too many. Yeah, and the girls were wild. And of course, the '60s, the pill had come out, and the girls were more amicable and everything. And as far as myself, I didn't get inducted to the mob. When I ended up owing certain people a lot of money, so we had to rob a bank, and I was able to pay them. And the biggest thing was when I was able to pay the $10,000 or $20,000. This was in the early '70s. This kind of money, the wise guys or the top bosses started to notice me. And they they're curious how a young guy like me could make all that money.
How old were you back then?
I was about 31, 32. In fact, I have a picture of me. I looked a lot different then.
Yeah, we'll show that. We'll show that picture.
Yeah. So it was about 1973 that I was brought in to the mob. I was inducted into the. And it wasn't like they say in the books and the movies and stuff. It's done in a very subtle manner. And my boss, the guy who brought me in, was Sonny Mercurio, Sonny the Baker, they called him. He owned a bakery. And he looked just like me.
Yeah.
My height. And he was he was a killer. He was a stone killer. But he was good to me at the beginning. And he turned out to be a rat. But I didn't find that out till 20 years later. But I always suspected him because my crew that I had, the bank robbers, they didn't trust him. They didn't like the setup. And they felt like either they were left out or they didn't like Sonny himself. They didn't trust him. And we had done a score. I was still doing scores. And Oscar, who was my main guy and my main driver, he came back and he told me, Mike, he says, they were going on a score one day. He says, there's something wrong here. There's a leak. He says, it looked like they were waiting for us. So he says, then it had to come out of the bakery. So I never believed it could be Sonny. I believed there was somebody around him. He was talking, and he mentioned it. And I'd like to take a break right now.
Yeah, no problem. We'll take a break. This is Chris V with Mobdrama.com. We got Little Mike here from Boston. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.